So far we have talked about censorship, libel, and copyright. We'll move on next to access to information. In America, the government is supposed to belong to the people. Freedom of Information laws, also referred to as FOI, open records, open meetings, or sunshine laws, are simply one means, a tool, by which the citizens' owners have given themselves the ability to keep tabs on or shed some sunshine on what their government and its officials are doing. Although these laws are available for use by all, journalists find them especially useful for informing the public. Even so, far too few journalists, both student and non-student, take advantage of the rights these laws provide. There are three main types of Freedom of Information law. The first are open records laws. Every state, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico has its own state open records requirement. In addition, the federal government has an open records law known as the Freedom of Information Act. Similarly, all states and the federal government also have an open meetings law. Finally, there are a number of miscellaneous provisions that show up in various state and federal laws that require the public disclosure of information. These pocket FOI laws generally focus on requiring the disclosure of a specific type of information and in some cases only apply to a specific body or institution. For example, at the college level, there are some very helpful provisions tucked within a huge federal education law that requires most schools to provide information about campus crime, student graduation rates, and their athletic programs. In addition, federal IRS rules require that all nonprofit organizations, which includes most private schools, make available a copy of their annual tax return upon request, something we'll talk about a bit more in a moment. It is important to note that, as a general rule, only public governmental bodies or public agencies must comply with FOI laws. Such bodies are usually funded by taxpayers and have some authority to make or enforce rules that the general public must follow. Purely private individuals or organizations, such as a private school or private company, are generally not covered. However, if an otherwise private body engages in public business, a court might find that they must also comply with an FOI law. A charter school that contracts with a public school district might be one example. Keep in mind also that almost all private bodies have some interaction with a public agency, so it may be possible to obtain the information you seek through a back door. For example, while a private school probably doesn't have to give you the results of its most recent cafeteria inspection, the city health department that conducted the inspection, a public body, clearly would have to provide the report. Finally, many of the pocket FOI laws apply equally to public and private bodies and are frequently tied to the receipt of government funding. As mentioned, both the federal government and state governments have Freedom of Information laws on the books. Generally, if you want to obtain access to the records or meetings of a state or local government agency, such as a public school district, a local or state police department, a state college or university, or the city dog catcher, you'll look to your state law. If you need information about or would like to attend the meeting of a federal agency, such as the Environmental Protection Agency, the FBI, or the U.S. Department of Education, you will use federal law. Understanding the basics of FOI law is pretty simple. Open record laws, both at the state and federal level, say pretty much the same thing. A public body must make its records available upon request unless the records are explicitly exempted by the open record statute. Of course, the exemptions, which vary from law to law, do complicate things, but they also generally fall into some common categories, most of which conform to common sense. For example, most laws contain an exemption that either allows or requires students to withhold the educational records of specific identifiable students. Makes sense. Law enforcement agencies can also generally withhold records that might interfere with an ongoing investigation or that might jeopardize national security. again, makes sense. And government agencies can often refuse to disclose medical, financial, or other personal documents that would constitute an illegal invasion of a person's privacy. Other common exemptions can include some government personnel records, records involving pending real estate deals, and documents that are part of an ongoing legal battle in which the government agency is involved. Again, because the exemptions vary, you'll need to check the specifics of the law you're using. However, it's important to keep in mind that the law presumes that all government records are open. In other words, you don't have to point to the provision that requires disclosure. Rather, the government has to point to the exemption that allows it to keep the record closed. Making a public records request is also pretty much a no-brainer. Simply ask the government official that you think keeps the record for a copy. Ask nicely and politely. A friendly verbal request is often all that is required. Sometimes the government agency or the law will insist that the request be in writing. A written request might also be required where you know the agency you're dealing with does not want to provide the information. In such cases, your written request will be the start of a paper trail of evidence that you might later have to point to should the agency deny your request in violation of the law. Once you make your request, most laws require that the agency official respond in a timely manner and either give you the record you've asked for or point out the exemption in the law that they believe allows them to deny your request. If, after reviewing their denial, you still believe that the law requires disclosure, most laws spell out the procedure for having the agency's decision reviewed. And if you think that filing a written request is too complicated or too much work, think again. Filing a written request is a simple matter of writing a letter. The Student Press Law Center's website has a one-of-a-kind automated letter generator for requesting public records that can help. To produce a letter ready for mailing, all you need to do is have a reasonable description of the record you're looking for. You don't need a specific document number or exact date, but the more precise your description, the better. And you need the name and contact information of the government official you believe keeps the records you're looking for. Open meeting laws work pretty much the same way. Again, all open meeting laws say much the same thing. A public body must provide notice of all official gatherings and allow the public to attend unless there is a specific exemption in the law that allows them to keep the doors closed. Many of the exemptions in open meeting laws are the same as those in open record laws. And again, the exemptions vary from law to law, so you'll have to check the specifics of the law you're using. Taking advantage of an open meeting law is usually even easier than using an open records law. Just show up at the meeting you want to attend. If the agency is not used to having visitors sit in on its meetings, you may want to have a copy of the open meeting law available. Again, courtesy counts. Do your best to keep your discussion friendly. If officials still tell you the meeting is closed, ask that your objection be recorded in the minutes of the meeting and leave. Immediately write down what happened and whom you spoke with. That may also be a good time to contact a media law attorney or the Student Press Law Center for help. As with records, most open meeting laws have provisions for appealing agency decisions. For more information on what records or meetings a particular state's law covers, every newsroom in the country should be aware of the publication Tapping Official Secrets by the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. The 50-state guide is geared specifically to journalists and can provide a quick yes or no answer to many of your questions about what records or meetings are publicly available. It also provides details about your state's legal requirements for complying with the law and practical suggestions for obtaining access. The guide is available free and online on the Reporters Committee website. Finally, in addition to the general open record and open meeting statutes, the law includes a number of provisions scattered about that can accurately be described as FOI laws. We already mentioned the laws requiring access to campus crime information. We also touched upon some of the provisions in the Federal Student Right to Know Act, which require most public and private colleges to provide information about how they operate. Of more interest to high school students, however, is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which, among other things, requires schools to provide students or their parents with a copy of their own education records, including transcripts, teacher recommendations, and test scores upon request. Also, federal rules require most private schools and other nonprofit organizations to provide a copy of their federal tax return, known as the IRS Form 990, which includes information about where money comes from and where it goes, including, for example, a list of the 5 highest paid employees at your school and their salaries. Unfortunately, a detailed discussion of the various pocket FOI laws is beyond the scope of this presentation. Much more information is available on the SPLC website. Remember, using FOI law to obtain information about how your government works is neither rude or nosy. In America, we've decided that we want a government that is ruled by the people, not the other way around. If that idea is going to work, we, the people, must know what our government and government officials are up to. Freedom of Information Law is one important means by which that happens. And now your assignment. Create a little quiz about all this information that you have heard on this video. Do your best to stump your new staff friends. We'll see who retained the most information. And when you're finished creating that quiz, send it to my email.